You kneel beside a shallow pool at the end of a long, hot day. The water is brown around the edges. Insects move across the surface. An animal track disappears into the mud beside your hand. You are thirsty enough to drink immediately. But you have no filter, no chlorine, no metal pot, and no laboratory telling you what might be living in that water. So what do? For most of human history, clean water did not arrive through a pipe. It had to be found, judged, carried, protected, and sometimes heated. And when people made the wrong choice, they became sick or died. Ancient humans did not survive because dirty water was harmless to them. Their bodies were not magically immune to parasites or dangerous bacteria. They survived because they learned the landscape, avoided the worst risks, developed practical methods, and sometimes accepted dangers that would be unthinkable today. Their first defense was not purification. It was location. Mobile hunter-gatherers could move toward water instead of forcing water to come to them. Rivers, lakes, springs, seasonal pools, snow, and rainfall shaped where people traveled, hunted, and stopped. Water also attracted animals, supported edible plants, provided fish, and created natural travel routes. That is why many ancient camps are found near old shorelines, rivers, and lakes. But not every source was equally safe. A clear spring emerging from the ground was usually a better choice than a warm pool filled with mud and animal waste. Fast-moving water could be preferable to stagnant water. Rain collected before it touched the ground could avoid some of the contamination found in streams and pools. Ancient people did not understand bacteria, but they understood patterns. They could notice foul smells, unusual color, dead animals, algae, insects, bad taste, or heavy animal traffic around a water source. They could remember which pool made someone sick, which spring remained during drought, and which route reached water before sunset. This knowledge was a map carried inside the group. A wrong turn did not mean inconvenience. It meant thirst, but even good judgment could not remove every danger. Water could look clear, smell normal, and taste harmless while still carrying organisms capable of causing severe illness. Choosing the best-looking source reduced risk. It did not eliminate it. There was another advantage ancient people could use: timing. Water collected after fresh rain was often safer than the same pool days later, after animals had returned and mud had warmed in the sun. Groups could also drink early in the morning when some sources were cooler and less disturbed. In dry country, experienced travelers learned to follow birds, insects, green vegetation, and animal paths toward hidden water. Survival depended on reading small clues before thirst became desperation. The second defense was movement. Small mobile groups did not remain in one place long enough to produce the same concentration of waste created by later towns and cities. When a campsite became dirty or a water source began to fail, the group could move. This did not make prehistoric water clean. Animals and parasites still contaminated it, but permanent settlements created a much larger problem. More people stayed beside the same water. Livestock gathered nearby. Human waste accumulated. The same source was used again and again. In a traveling group, contamination might remain scattered. In a crowded village, it could build up. The history of water is also the history of settlement. Once people began growing crops, keeping animals, and living permanently in one place, they could no longer depend only on movement and memory. They needed access to water they could control. More than 7,000 years ago, farming communities in Central Europe built timber-lined wells. Some were carefully constructed from joined wooden beams, showing that Neolithic communities could build stable structures to reach groundwater. A well changed the problem completely. Instead of walking to an exposed riverbank, people could draw water from below the surface. Groundwater was not automatically safe, but a protected well could reduce contact with mud, surface debris, and animals. It also allowed communities to live farther from a visible river or spring. But wells belong to a much later chapter of human history. What about people who lived tens of thousands of years earlier? They had another solution. They carried water. Most early containers were probably made from materials that decay: skin, bark, wood, woven fibers, gourds, or animal organs. Because these rarely survive, archaeology preserves only part of the story. One remarkable clue survived in southern Africa. At Deep Kloof Rock Shelter, researchers found engraved ostrich eggshell fragments dating to roughly 60,000 years ago. The shape and pattern of these pieces support the idea that ostrich eggs were used as containers. An egg could be emptied through a small opening, filled with water, sealed, and carried. It sounds simple, but it changed human movement. Hunters could travel farther, bring water back to camp, and store it along a route. A fragile shell became a portable survival tool, but carrying water solved only one problem. It did not remove contamination. So could ancient humans boil water? They could, and boiling did not require a metal pot. People could heat stones in a fire, then place those stones into water, held inside a skin bag, wooden container, woven basket, or lined pit. One hot stone would cool quickly, but repeated stones could raise the water's temperature until it boiled. Experiments showed that this method works. Archaeologists have also found stones that appear to have been repeatedly heated and then cooled in liquid. At sites in northern China and Paleolithic Spain, fire-cracked stones have been interpreted as evidence of stone boiling. But there is an important difference between what was possible and what was routine. Ancient people may have boiled liquids for cooking plants, softening food, extracting fat, or preparing meat. That process could also make contaminated water safer, but we cannot assume that every group boiled all of its drinking water. Fuel and heating stones required time. A thirsty traveler might drink immediately rather than build a fire and wait. Ancient people also did not need germ theory to learn that heating sometimes helped. They could observe results. If certain practices caused fewer stomach problems, people could repeat them and teach them to others, even without knowing why they worked. Still, ancient survival was never based on one secret invention. It was a chain of imperfect protections. Choose a better source, avoid water containing visible decay, remember where springs remained during drought, move before a pool disappeared, carry water away from the source, protect stored water from dirt and animals, reach groundwater through wells, and heat liquids when containers, fuel, and time allowed it. And sometimes drink unsafe water because dehydration was the more immediate threat. That last part is easy to forget. Modern people often imagine that nature was once cleaner, or that ancient humans were simply tougher. But prehistoric life included parasites, infection, diarrhea, dehydration, and high mortality. We mostly see those who survived long enough to leave descendants, not every child lost after illness or every group forced to abandon a contaminated source. There was also no single ancient human solution. A group living beside a cold mountain spring faced a very different problem from one crossing a desert. People near lakes could return daily. People in dry regions needed containers, route knowledge, and careful timing. Permanent farmers needed wells and storage. Different environments produced different methods. So how did ancient humans survive without clean water? Mostly, they did not simply accept whatever water they found. They searched for the cleanest source available. They organized their movements around it. They carried it in containers that rarely survive in the archaeological record. They protected it, stored it, reached it underground, and sometimes heated it. They learned from sickness even when they could not see its cause, and they survived imperfectly. The real difference between their world and ours is not that they could safely drink anything. It is that every drink required knowledge, memory, labor, judgment, and sometimes a risk they had no choice but to take. Clean water was never automatic. It was one of humanity's earliest technologies, long before it ever came from a tap.